Thank you, Mr. Wong, for sharing with us your valuable advice and insights into the banking industry. Mr. Wong, please remain on stage for the question and answer section.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to our Q&A section. Although we would like to learn even more from Mr. Wong, due to the time limit, we can only accept around 2 to 3 questions. So
no, I
please...
can hang on a little bit longer. It's all right. Now, there will be some planted questions, I know. I've been through this before. So, but seriously, I want you to ask, what are the questions in your mind? What do you want to know about banking? What do you want to know about anything? Okay, if I can answer them, I will. I'll be very open about it.
That would be great news to us. So the first question, who would like to ask? Okay, maybe that gentleman over there.
Good afternoon, Mr. Wong. I'm Hugo. I work in the banking operation industry and supporting the equity trading. And I am in banking operation represent a significant workforce in the bank. So, but I see that there is a lot of continuous process migration to other countries like Malaysia and Philippines. So what is your viewpoint about the future and the trend in the banking operation?
Well, this is like, as you say, it's a trend in terms of outsourcing. You always kind of like move to the country with lower costs. Right? And that would be the trend. And I think that this trend will continue. But however, there is something against this trend as far as regulation is concerned. Because there are some countries that says, well, I don't want any of my customer data to be outside the country. So in other words, the database of the customers of that country has to be inside that country. For example, like China. Okay? So, but as far as the operations is concerned, the trend the trend for outsourcing it will continue.
Thank you, Mr. Peter, for your wonderful presentation. And I'm Cindy from CUHK. And personally, I'm very interested in private banking. So I would like to ask a question about it. As we know, like private bank is like department highly relies on your network. So although China can see as a huge opportunity for us, but for a lot of local bankers, they may find it hard to expand their business into China. So do you think it will be a huge challenge to the private banks in Hong Kong?
I think at this point in time, it is a challenge because China does not encourage money flowing out from China into other countries. But I think that if you look at it, China is changing. Look at the Shanghai Hong Kong Stock Connect. Okay? So in other words, there's money from China flowing into Hong Kong. This is a capital account opening. So the money is moving already. It's going in that direction. The two-way flow. It's you have the north to south and south to north. And then very soon you have the mutual recognition of funds. So I think that this will gradually open. Not now, okay, but it will gradually open. I'll probably say in the next 2 to 3 years, I think you would see more opening in that area. So what year are you now?
So my question is,
what year are you?
Actually, my question is about, do you think it will be a huge difficulty for the local bankers to explore, the huge difficulty for local bankers to explore their business in the Greater China? Because they don't
in private banking?
Yeah.
Yes, I agree with you in that area because China does not allow money to move out of China very freely right now. But if you look at what I'm trying to say is that there's a gradual evolution that it will allow money to move out, but not at this point in time, but it will move.
So may I add a follow-up question?
Yes.
So what do you think will be the advantage of our local private banks to compete with?
Well, there are local private banks. First of all, there are a lot of customers in Hong Kong already. We have a lot of customers. And there are also lots of, if you look at the private banks in Hong Kong, you have the UBS, you have HSBC. Almost every big bank have a private bank. And then these are the banks. These are the private banks that are being used by a lot of our local people. And then also because Hong Kong is an international financial center, there are a lot of foreigners also use the private bank. So private bank still has a lot of opportunities. Now one of the most important aspect of private bank is about trust. Forming a trust, how to manage the family's assets and so forth. These are very important. And then as far as HSBC is concerned, we actually held a big meeting with all the second generation of the wealthy families, and then telling them is that, okay, what happens when you get a divorce? What happens, and a lot of these things. What happened to your assets? The division of your assets. So lots of opportunities in private banks, and there are new products all the time.
Okay, thank you.
Well, there are two questions I have in mind. They're very nice, technical as the previous two. Firstly is, in the media or movies, we portray a lot about how the glamour it is to be in the banking industry. And that's probably why a lot of us are interested, even though they probably are not, I wouldn't say capable, but not the right job for them. So I don't want to focus on the glamour bit. I'm just wondering, you having such an established career, there must be times that there are the darker side of this brilliant industry. So I would like to know a little bit about that. And secondly, regarding your speech, you talked a little bit about investment banking and different sectors in banking. And that being said, it's still the most of the people still want to get into the investment banking industry just because of the pay differential and also the glamour, and as well as when you get into investment banking industry, after 2 years, you can always get into somewhere else. So I personally am a CUHK student at the moment. And when I'm looking at that, I probably think I'm not suitable for investment banking. But if I'm presented the chance, I probably will still choose it. So you also talked about changes. What do you think you can do about that? And do you think that's appropriate? And what do you think about it?
Well, first of all, let me talk about the darker side of banking career. There are times that you get to the point where you just say that, well, the heck with this, I just don't want to do this anymore. There are times, right? And there are times where you just you get so excited about what you do, it's just like it keeps you going. But that's life. You will never have, if life is sort of like, if you draw a line, if life is like this, you may as well commit suicide. So nothing's going to happen, right? So what I'm trying to say is that you'll always fall somewhere along the way. You always have a problem somewhere along the way. The most important thing is how you get back up and move on. Now, I think that is something that's coming from my sports background. I'm very competitive. I've been in varsity sports all of my life. So it's not like that I fall down and I'll lay down and that's it and die. But I fall down, I will get back up and move on and try to win again. So the darkest side of things is you always bump into things like, for example, in my 33 years of banking career, I've gone through 10 financial crises. Okay? The first one is 1981, where the interest rate went up to 20-somewhat%. Nobody wants to pay back the loans. Then is 1983, the Sino-British Agreement, followed by everybody wanted to leave Hong Kong. Then 87 was the big crash in the United States. Then 89 was the Tiananmen Square. 91 was the bank runs in Hong Kong. And then 97 was the Asian financial crisis. 2000 was the bursting of the internet bubble. And then Hong Kong property fell by 70%, and then followed by SARS. And then followed by a global financial crisis, and then the European debt situation, Lehman crisis, you name it, got it. Right. So every time you get to somewhere along that point, your business will not be good. It will be quite volatile. But the most important thing is that whether you be able to challenge yourself to manage your people such that you all become a part of a team to go through a crisis. Going through a crisis individually is hard, but going through a crisis as a team is much easier because you can talk to each other. So whenever I have my darkest moments, I always try to make sure that I have a team around me, a team of good people. And let me finish, okay? Then you have then you talk about the investment banks, all right? Investment banks, after you join it for like about 3 years, you'll find that everything is very repetitive. It's M&A, it's bond issuance, it's IPOs, and so forth. A lot of things it's quite the same. Okay? And you can work on the other side of investment banking, that's corporate banking. You work on the company side of things, the corporate finance. Okay? That's not bad. You know the same thing, actually. Because a lot of the investment banks, like for example HSBC does not have a big investment bank per se. Big investment banks like, they would go out and buy a building and say that, well, okay, I'll hold on to the building and then maybe 5 years later it's becoming more expensive, then I'll sell it, something like that. But as far as HSBC is concerned, our investment banking is only that we're going to help our customers. Okay? If they want to buy some assets overseas, if they want to do an acquisition, if they want to issue bonds, IPOs, and so forth, we help them. So the flip side of that IPO is that on the corporate finance side, the side that handle the customer. Okay? You have a relationship manager for Chung Kong, for Swire, for the big companies. So that is also a very, very nice job. It's not just about investment. It's not just about investment banking. What was your third question?
I actually just think about you talked about the personal experience. What I'm trying to ask is, maybe a lot of us watched the movie Wolf of Wall Street, and we know that there is some grim, at least to say the least, there's some not so nice part in the movie that portrayed about the people who work in the finance industry. And I know people, I have a friend who's working as a psychiatrist, and she knows a lot of people who are from the
So the bankers are all nuts.
No, there are a lot. I wouldn't say that. What I'm trying to ask is, how can you make yourself, in the old Chinese saying, maybe 出污泥而不染, and maybe, I'm not saying everyone, I'm sure there are a lot of people who are very, very nice and they have really, like you, a really good career. And
thank you very much.
And
I'll come back and speak again.
You spend a lot of time with the next generation like us. And when you look at, I'm sure in every industry there will be people like that. And when you look at those people, what do you think about them? And on the other hand, about the investment banking thing that I talked about is, as undergraduates or even postgraduate students like us, it's difficult when you look at the pay differential that if I get into investment banking industry, they will pay us, I don't know, 2 or 3 times as much as I work in a corporate banking industry.
Do you like investment banking?
No, personally, I don't. I'm not even sure whether I want to work in the banking industry. I just want to know more about it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I understand a lot of my friends and a lot of people in my course that we're all considering our careers, but the pay differential and the differences between the two, in a more personal level, it's difficult to resist that temptation.
Let me answer your question, okay? Right. First of all, don't always look at pay. You need to get into an industry that you like, you're passionate about. Because if you're not passionate about certain things, you won't be able to carry on. Okay? The money is not going to carry you. Your passion is going to carry you. Okay? So that's very important. Forget about Wall Street, okay? All the movies that you have watched. I think the most important thing about your question is about integrity and values of a company. It's very important when you enter a company, you try to understand their values. Whether the company is a crook or company is a straight company, their values will tell you. The integrity will tell you. When you go through training, it will tell you what the company is all about. Okay? So don't worry about whether some individuals are not being straight. There will always be individuals that are not being straight. Okay? But what is most important to you is that whether the company's values are there and whether you are being straight. Okay? Any questions? Let's have 10 more minutes, and that's it.
Sure.
Okay. Yes.
Hello, Mr. Wong. Thank you for your valuable insights. My name is Jonathan, and I'm a student currently studying towards a master's degree in engineering. From my understanding, you have an undergraduate and master's degree in computer science.
Yes.
So I was wondering what made you change from computer science to finance, and how has your background in computer science helped you in your career?
When we first, in our days, all right, you know, when I came back from the United States after my studies, and it's like, you know, we're not as fortunate as all of you, saying that, you know, people come into the campus, recruit, this, that, and so forth. We came back to Hong Kong and we take the South China Morning Post and then take all the big companies' names and write them and try to get a job, okay? At least, you know, in a relevant area. So I really did not, you know, my computer science background helped me to get into a job where it's a little bit of analysis on finance, on the business, and also being asked to automate certain parts of the reporting process. So the way it's helped me is that it's the way I think. When you go through, you know, your engineering is the same thing, computer science the same thing, you go through flowcharts, right? Every step of the way, what do you do every step of the way until it gets to the very end. So what it does, it helps you, in a broader terms, you will think in terms of what's going to happen tomorrow, day after tomorrow, in a month, in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. So it is something that will help you to progressively think forward, and in a very, very logical way. Okay? So as far as I'm concerned, I think the computer science has helped me quite a bit in terms of my way of thinking about things.
I think you mentioned that it is always better to lead change, but banking career is a fairly stable profession. How could we lead change as you suggest?
Okay, so let me repeat your question. You're saying that I talked about change, right? And then banking is a very simple profession. Profession. Always go through changes. Yes. So how do I manage that? Okay. I think it's very important that we anticipate changes. Okay. For example, when I look at China, okay, and when I look at everything that China is doing about RMB internationalization, at that point in time, I will start preparing the company for the change of China using RMB as a trade settlement currency. So when you try to think about change, don't wait for the change, anticipate what are changes, because you will see what's happening. So you need to anticipate the change and be ready for it. I'll give you an example. We anticipated that, you know, China will use RMB as a trade settlement currency, and it hasn't happened for a long time. It hasn't happened for a very long. But what we did was we get all the systems ready for that change. Okay. Now, when a change happens, we're ready. Okay. So you have anticipated the change. Your computer systems is ready. Okay. And it's also making sure that your people are being trained to do it. Okay? So the key word about this whole thing about change is the anticipation of change. Okay?
So thank you, Peter, for your sharing. And actually, I have 2 questions. The
Yeah,
first,
let's make it one. I
okay.
want to answer one over there, all right? So,
Okay, sure,
and then we need to end.
Then let me ask a more company-specific questions about your anticipation of change, because I know HSBC always emphasizing the South-South trade, the importance of that.
Yeah.
And we can see now we have the One Road, One Belt policies and the AIIB. So as a service center, Hong Kong, what role can Hong Kong play in terms of participating in the AIIB, and how HSBC are ready or already prepare for this change?
Let me just relate this to you. What I've done is I wrote a proposal to the Chinese government saying that the Treasury Center of the AIIB should be in Hong Kong. Okay, the reason for that is quite simple. It's because in China, you have a currency that's not convertible, right? So it's very hard to do hedging. It's very hard to do fundraising. In other words, if I say I want to raise $10 billion inside China, the government can give me $10 billion, no problem. But it would be very difficult to raise $10 billion in the market because they just don't have it. They don't have that capability. Okay? So as far as Hong Kong is concerned, Hong Kong has that capability because we've been doing it all the time for quite a number of years. So this is the way that we anticipate change when it comes out. We also anticipate the change by when the AIIB was being formed, we talked to them. We say that how can we help? Because if AIIB wants to be formed, it needs to have article of association. It needs to have how do you form the various accounts from the various countries. How do you organize the AIIB and so forth? So we anticipated that, and we offer help to AIIB so that we can be their partner. So this is something that, whenever there's a change, you always want to be part of it or be their partner. And so using our knowledge, global knowledge, we can help the AIIB. As far as the One Belt, One Road is concerned, I think, like, for example, we just had the chat with the PBOC, and then they wanted to, do more investment in Indonesia. So we have a big presence in Indonesia, so we can help. So these are the things that we must be ready to do. Okay. There's one more question. Yes.
Thank you, Peter. I'm July. I'm from CUHK and the engineering faculty. And my question is about the differences between the local bank and the bank from China, like CCB Asia or the Bank of China. Can you tell me about the differences of the industry or target client and or the market or the operation of these different banks?
I think the banks, okay, sooner or later they'll all kind of come together in a certain direction, all right? If they're behind now, they will learn and then they will move forward. But I think the most important thing about the bank is about its culture, okay? What is the culture like in the bank? What is the values of the bank? That you need to assess. As far as the market is concerned, China is not totally ready for an international market. I've seen a lot of Chinese banks who open branches all over the world, but they constantly deal with the Chinese, but not the local companies. So I think that they need to somewhere along the way, they need to take a step forward to deal with the local companies in order to understand the local culture. And that's where the competitive advantage of HSBC, because we are present in over 70-some-odd countries around the world, and then we use a lot of locals, and therefore we know the local culture of each of the countries. So when the Chinese companies want to move to, let's say, UK or Australia to do a mergers and acquisition to buy a company, we can do that. We can do that transaction for them because we have presence in UK and we have a presence in Australia. So the market is going to be very different. I think right now China is still homing in on the local market or the local corporates, even especially inside China. But as far as the companies moving overseas, the Chinese company moving overseas, we're getting a big part of it. Okay.
But I've seen that like CCB have a kind of over 50 or 60 years history in Hong Kong. So is there any difference between Hong Kong CCB and Chinese?
Yes, because as far as Hong Kong is concerned, Hong Kong is an international market. So the employees of CCB is exposing themselves to an international market. How does an international market work? Okay. But as far as China is concerned, the CCP is still operating within an environment where there's a single currency that's not convertible. So they're not exposed to foreign currencies like New Zealand dollars, Australian dollars, so they're not exposed to that. They're very, very single-minded on one currency. So Hong Kong is different because it's international, and that's the reason why Hong Kong needs to continue to be international to have its competitive advantage.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, everyone.